Hey everyone, Eric Watson here, freelance writer, player of games, writer of words, recorder of videos, and tabletop role-playing aficionado. Welcome to another DM's Guild review, my written and video review series. Take a look at the adventures and supplemental material at the Dungeon Masters Guild website. This video will be reviewing the magic item supplement, the Foestone Compendium, designed by Belshaw for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. This review has been sponsored by the publisher, and a review copy has been provided for the purposes of this review. If you're interested in a sponsored review, please reach out via email, Twitter, or Discord, or my submission form at roguewatson.com. If you enjoy this content, consider using my affiliate links for your online shopping and supporting me via patreon.com/roguewatson. So I've played a lot of, video game RPGs over the years, and I definitely like any system that allows me to capture monsters. Not necessarily a game that's focused on it like a literal Pokemon, but just has that as like a side thing you can do. And I also like games that allow me to kind of customize my gear. With, I guess the classic example is like Diablo 2 added socketable gems that you can, add into certain items and give them additional buffs and stuff. Foestone Compendium kind of combines those two concepts into an entire new system for creating magical gear. So the idea is you first of all have to give your players, or if you're a player you find, a Foestone. What that allows you to do is capture a defeated monster, store its essence within that stone, and then you can use that stone to either grant yourself some new abilities based on the monster, give yourself some new traits, maybe a language, or you could create a weapon or a piece of armor that's all based on what that creature can do. It's not quite... I don't want to make a Monster Hunter comparison because it's a lot different than that. In Monster Hunter, you are crafting gear using various, ingredients that have dropped, I guess you could say, from monsters, and then that gear all has its own separate stats and information. This is a little bit different from that in that you are either enchanting just regular non-magical gear with this one Foestone thing, the actual monster itself essentially, or the Foestone can just turn into that kind of gear that you need. In fact, it's those really kind of open-ended moddable rules that makes this really attractive for me, especially because anytime I read something that's got new rule systems on it, the tendency is to get a little bit too into the weeds and add too many rules. And I really appreciate that here the designer did come up with some rules for using Foestones, but for basically every single rule, it's like, here are the options you can use. You can, choose to use any of these options, or you cannot. For example, right at the beginning, it says, hey, for Foestones, if you want, you can just have it be where if somebody has a Foestone and they reduce a monster to 0 hit points, it's automatically captured. So you throw the Pokeball and it succeeds 100% of the time. Or you can have the option where you still have to reduce it to 0 hit points, obviously, and I literally picture the throwing of the Pokeball, but I guess you're just kind of holding the stone. You have to maybe succeed on a skill check, and in this case, it suggests maybe just doing a non-skill check that's just based on your proficiency bonus. You're still rolling a d20. It's almost a death save at that point, but a little bit of a modifier scaled to your level. You could also limit and say it must be the person who killed the monster, and they have to be holding the Foestone in order to have it. Or it could be anybody that's around within 30 feet could be captured. These are all, none of these are hard-coded rules. They're all just options that DMs could use, which is really how I want to see a lot of rules implemented. One of the examples is you could have the Foestone. You could require the mundane version of that equipment in order for the player to actually enchant it and become a magic item. For example, if they wanted to create some armor based on this monster, they would need just a regular suit of that armor, and then they could, attach the Foestone to that, and then it becomes that new magical thing. Or you could say, you know what, that's even too fiddly. We're going to get rid of that and just have it be where, if I want it to be this armor, it'll just turn into that kind of armor, and there we go. Which is funny because I went through a similar situation in our Rime of the Frostbane campaign. I came up with some rules for crafting Shardle equipment for a player, and initially he was like, oh, I want to make this, but I don't have, I guess I don't have a necklace on me, and we were kind of out, away from the town or whatever, and I was like, you know what, screw it, you don't need to have a necklace, that part's just it's just flavor text at that point. You can just make the item. So I can kind of see where you want to, you know, again, when you're designing these things, your tendency is, okay, I'm gonna have very, you know, firm rules on all this. But really, when it comes down to it, like, you end up loosening a lot of these rules. At least in my case, obviously all DMs are different. And I like the fact that a lot of times when you're looking at these new systems, you know, very few, and this isn't a knock against the design or anything, but very few DMs are going to run this as written. They're going to take it and they're going to hack it apart, and they're going to take what they like and change other things about it. So I really appreciate the designer kind of acknowledges that by giving you all these different options. The best example I can give is what you're looking at right here, which is the Foestone types. So we've got levels and types with the Foestones, and the level, there are 5 different levels, and that basically determines the max CR that you of a creature, the challenge rating of a creature that you can fit into your Pokeball. it's a Pokeball, Great Ball, Ultra Ball, Master Ball kind of a thing, except it doesn't work, you know, it doesn't work like a better chance of capturing. We already went through the capture rules. This is just literally you can't capture that high enough level of monster, so it's an easy way for you to kind of limit you know, how powerful of a creature the players could get. It's also, interestingly, limits for the lowest level creatures, which is the base level, that's a CR 0 to 4, which is designed for character level. I don't know, it's at 0, it should be 1 to 4, there's no character level 0. They are limited use, which is a really big balancing tool. So the others, they all make permanent magic items, which are very powerful, but you can tell it's for tier 2 and above, which is more appropriate, versus if you're trying to create a magic item, you can still engage with this system, but instead it's like, you know, it's a once per use kind of a magic item. You're kind of creating this interesting temporary spell effect or something, which is still pretty cool, and I think that's a smart way of balancing it. So that's fairly hard code in the rules, where it's like, yeah, you probably should use these levels. It's the only one I think that it's generally saying you should use. However, the optional one is if you want to use different types. So there are 8 different types, I guess technically 9 if you want to use the universal one, but really if you want to use the Foestone type options, there are 8, which means not only are these Foestones rated by their level rating, but they also come in different flavors, to where even once you successfully capture a creature, whether it's a Yeti or a Kobold or a Beholder or whatever, vampire, you have to have that certain kind of stone that you're capturing in order to make that certain item. So certain creatures may not even have the right stones to go in with those items, versus, you know, so in other words, you have to have a weapon stone to be able to make a weapon out of this creature, but even those creatures only have limited types of stone. So that creates another barrier and makes it limitations for the players. And initially I was off put by that. I was like, I would, first of all, you know, if I introduce Foestones in my campaign, which I actually really like this idea, I would not literally make this a system that, you know, everybody can just use all the time. You can just purchase these from the store, whatever. In my campaign, this would just be another cool, rare magic item that you find, and it gives power to the players to decide how they want to use it and when. And I think introducing it as a certain kind of type in that instance would not be wise. Instead, I would just want to give them a universal Foestone that they can use for any creature up to a certain level, but they can then pick and choose whatever they want to, you know, slot that creature into. Versus if you were going to use this as a thing that anybody can go to the store and picture a 12-pack of Foestones, then I can see why you want to maybe introduce a bit of a limiting factor. So I like the fact that the designer specifically says, hey, look, there are, you know, levels of Foestones, but all of them are simply just Foestones. You don't have to literally worry about you know, the level, the types. If you don't want to, they can just be universal, and that's how I would do it, and I really, really appreciate it. So I really like the way these rules are implemented. It's only like 10 pages. It's very easy to understand. I believe they include some pricing for if you want to buy and sell. Yeah, there they are, in-game compendium tables, as well as once they're actually full of the creatures, you could then, I guess, turn around and sell them and just completely break D&D 5e's economy, which is already kind of crazy as is. So the majority, so I love the rules part of it. Now the majority of what we're actually getting here are the Foestones, and you might have missed it, but on the front page it says there are 666 Foestone options, and the designer says, hey, this was just a coincidence, but that is also a choice, even though that has nothing to do with, you know, it just uses everything from the monster manual. So we've got demons and everything else, but that's funny. There is an insane variety here of stuff. So first of all, the designer went through and basically pulled just about every single monster from the official original 5e monster manual. and broke them apart and said, okay, here's like the weapon you could use, here's maybe the armor, here's an object, here's what's called insight, which is usually gain a language, maybe a proficiency or something, based on just about every monster. The only ones that aren't are like regular like beast type creatures, and I think the kind of generic NPC humanoid stat blocks. But every other monster is given something cool, and instead of flipping through literally almost 200 pages worth of creatures, I'm just gonna highlight probably some of the more interesting ones here. So let's see if I can skip around to some pages. So the Banshee is a cool example because with the armor stone, you get a +1, which is pretty common. You usually get a plus, if it's a weapon, you get +1 or +2, depending on the level of the creature. Armor, same thing. You gain incorporeal armor, which allows you to basically move like a ghost, or like, what is the X-Men? Kitty Pryde can do that, where she becomes, intangible and can like literally move through objects and everything, which is freaking awesome. And it's part of your armor, which is amazing. Now this one is interesting because the Foestone is a base, because Banshee is technically, I think it's a CR4, I want to say off the top of my head. By the way, really strong creature for tier 1. And it says specifically you need a +1 Foestone to create this item because, as you recall I mentioned earlier, if you're using a base level Foestone, it only creates items that are temporary in use, and usually it's like one use. So it's basically like a spell scroll or a potion or something where it's very finite, one use. So another example, the Cursed Bauble of Sorrow kind of creates this interesting thing that you would give somebody else, where they wear this item and they begin exhaustion, they get nightmares. Again, and it's a permanent thing, so you need a +1 Foestone. For an example of a temporary one, though, the Ability Stone is you grant them Wail, which is the DC con save, or anybody who can hear the creature within 30 feet takes 3d6 psychic damage. Now, after one use, this Foestone shatters. What's interesting is if you go back and look at the rules, when a Foestone shatters, it actually releases the creature inside, which I think is a really cool system. I forget if this one has optional rules to do that or not, but I like that effect. And it's pretty rare because it really only affects lower levels, because the higher levels, it never really shatters. You're always using that creature. But for the lower level stuff, it tends to shatter and break and release that creature, which it does. For the summons, I know it includes rules for, the summon can be under your control, or it could be never under your control, or it can be under your control if you make a right skill check, or you have to make that skill check every round to maintain control of it. So there's some cool rules there, which I think could be interesting for the creature that's released. But I like the idea that a clever player could maybe try to use it while also hoping like, okay, also I'm going to try to summon this creature and run the hell away because we just summoned a Banshee in the middle of this fight. Or it's a desperate mode where it's like, oh, I want to use this even though it could be real nasty that it could be released. Or maybe the first time they do that, the players don't know that when the Foestone shatters, it actually spawns the creature again, even if it's at like 1 hit point or something. I think that's a really cool little fine print addition to this system. Let's see, we can look at some other ones. Oh, we got to look at the Beholder, I think is on the next page. Yep. Classic Beholder. If you have an armor stone, you get the anti-magic armor, which again is kind of like its cone of anti-magic field. The object stone is the Eye of the Beholder, where it gives you a little kind of pet eyeball that follows you around and gives you expertise in perception. The ability stone gives you a goddamn eye ray. It literally grows an eye stalk out of your head, and you have to roll, I believe, when you first use it, and that's the eye ray you get. You get a freaking Beholder eye ray, like eyeball stalk laser beam. That's awesome. And each of these, because beholders have such a crazy alien mind about being, paranoid and just their own sense of self-delusion and everything, they all come with these interesting curse effects that could affect you, or in fact, in one case, there's a 1% chance. You roll percentile dice. If you roll a 1, the eye stalk fails to control your head. You lose the ability to control it, and you feel like it basically gains a mind of its own, which I love the fact that a DM suddenly controls this like little eyeball on the side of your head. And as a DM, I would probably laser blast people that the Beholder wasn't a fan of. So again, a really cool example for a bunch of items. Now, some of these, there's no weapon stone for this one. So it does get a little tricky if, you only give your player certain stones and then they want to be able to use certain ones and then they're not sure, I guess you would give them maybe you could give them the compendium and say, here are your options. But I would probably tell them ahead of time, because if they're trying to use their weapon stone, like, oh, nothing's coming out of there because there's technically no weapon you're making, even though there's other things that are similar to that. So I do feel like the type thing gets a little too fiddly, but again, that's that's on me as somebody who just doesn't want to fiddle with that. And the way I would introduce this system into the campaign, and again, instead of it being a con for me, I will praise the fact that the designer included this whole typing thing as an option. I will also mention that, presentation is not that great on this entire supplement. It's a whole lot of stock art, and it's a whole lot of just columns of text. It basically is what you're getting, which I feel for the designer. Like, what else are you really going to do here? Because you're literally just listing endless things, and they're organized pretty well, but there's no real big page art or pictures of I don't know, interesting equipment and stuff. It's basically just the monsters themselves. I would have thought maybe we got some cool I don't know, Soul Calibur looking sword, monstrous swords or something interesting there. I would have appreciated. But I will say what I do like seeing, even though I wouldn't use the types in my campaign, I like seeing them in this book because it really helps pop everything out and make it interesting to look at a glance. Look at how when I kind of scroll through here, the thing that pops out the most is this cool subheading that says Weapon Stone, Armor Stone, Ability Stone, Insight Stone, and it really helps break apart each of these areas and draws the eye. Like, I think that honestly saves the entire presentation aspect to me, is having these. Even though I wouldn't use the types myself, I think it works very well in an organizational sense to keep when presenting this information to DMs and to an extent players. I think it really helps to separate all the information out and the way to organize that information. So I think that looks really, really good. I'm going to go and look at a few other ones. Page 92 is the Galabdur. These are the small rock people. Might as well be like a Geodude or something. The Armor Stone grants you +1 to AC, but you also get the Rolling Rock Armor, which allows you to roll up into a little rock ball, charge forward 20 feet, and then you can do damage. You have to roll a strength throw or knock them down. You get to do, I believe, a bonus weapon attack or something. And then the Ability Stone, you can just animate your own Galabdur, which again, you can use all those different summoning rules that are included as options in rulebook for whatever the DM decides they want to roll with. Or if you're boring, you can use the Insight Stone to learn the Terran language. Come on, you can get freaking rock armor or the ability to summon a rock dude. I don't need to speak to them. There's some really cool ideas here too. The Mummy. For the Object Stone, you gain Mummy wrappings. This one, as a bonus action, you grapple somebody. Okay, so once you grapple somebody, you make a bonus action to impose a con saving throw, and if you fail, the creature becomes an undead stat block under your control. Just by grappling them and you're wrapping them up in bindings. That really needs to have a fine print. That needs to be, which I checked and I don't think it has it, but it needs to be humanoid only or size only or something, because that seems extremely trying to say breakable. That players are gonna take advantage of that. Basically, they're just gonna grapple your big boss and all of a sudden use their fucking bindings, which granted is a low DC, but still. Now, this is an example of it's a base Foestone, so you only get the one use of this, so that helps, the fact that you can only do it once, but still, that's a very powerful ability. And the other option, of course, you gain that cool Mummy Dreadful Glare, where they can become frightened or possibly paralyzed. For an example of some weapons, let's see, there is a Grell weapon, where you basically get their cool, paralyzing tentacles by enchanting a whip, or again, because the rules are the kind of moddable, you can just have the weapon stone turn into the whip itself, but it has the option of, inflicting the poisoned and paralyzation conditions with a failed Constitution saving throw. I also liked the Medusa. In fact, the Medusa has a lot of cool options where you can enchant a bow, crossbow, or javelin as a snake launcher, which when you critically hit with this +1 weapon, also has +1 poison damage, the projectile on a critical hit turns into a snake, and then it literally becomes, it hits, and then it becomes a little flying snake that fucks with the enemy that you're attacking. That's fantastic, and they remain summoned up to an hour, which is fun. Now, I like the fact that it's balanced where it only hits on a crit, but I love weapons and things that have different big effects on crits, because I feel like crits are not too uncommon in 5e, and it's to where not a lot of cool things tend to happen. So I think that's a very cool thing. The armor gives you the Crown of Snakes. This one probably need to have more actual rules to it, but it just says it kind of intimidates somebody. It does give you +1 to AC. And the Object Stone is a little Medusa figurine, which you can turn into a little snake that can, help you like a little familiar, or the ability stone is you just gain a Medusa's Petrifying Gaze, which is, of course, a very powerful ability. So that's one creature that gives you a lot of cool different ideas. And there are nearly 300 creatures, all of them from the monster manual, that are represented here, each of which has anywhere between 1 and 5 of those types of stone abilities associated with them. Now, yes, there are a little bit of copy-paste jobs, especially when we get to dragons. All the dragons are represented here, and all of them are very much like, you're just changing the elemental resistance when it comes to the armor, and you're changing the extra, elemental damage when it comes to the sword or whatever. And that's fine. Like, that does inflate your numbers, but you know what inflates the numbers? The monster manual also, and people like all their dragons. They did a whole other book about dragons. So I don't necessarily have a problem with that here, especially because there's just so much content on everything else that I was very, very impressed with the amount of work that is done to, and I think it's probably a fun job, is to sit there and look at all these monsters and then distill all of their different qualities into a, magical gear. And I think what I maybe would have liked to have seen, I'm not going to knock it for this, is the added effect that whatever gear you are enchanting, or if it's turning into that gear, then it looks like that kind of item. So that's something that I like from the Monster Hunter games, is whenever you see a sword and shield or a piece of armor that is based on that monster, it very much looks like it has the color scheme, it has whatever their striking features are. Not just the mechanics, but the actual aesthetics of it, I think would be very, very cool. So it does mention a little bit, somewhere here and there, like there's the bearded devil gives you this fake beard that obviously just looks like a bearded devil's beard with the bits that can fling out and stuff. That part's really cool. So I would have liked to see, I guess, more descriptions, especially if it's weapon or armor, something that you're going to be physically wearing that reflects that monster that you are using. And to kind of close things out, there's also some funny jokes in here that I noted. I probably did not, I know I didn't see them all. So there's a thing such as curse stones, which it's a little ambiguous if these are meant to be known by, I think they are meant to be known to where if you literally have, like, some objects have a curse with them, in which case I don't think the player is meant to know that it's a cursed item, versus some foe stones are actual curse stones, which means they're designed to give to people you hate, I guess. They're basically, they do something bad. And one of the funny ones, which I think is just totally random, because you think a Tyrannosaurus Rex, you're like, okay, cool, we're going to get some kind of cool, like, chomping ability, or, I'm going to get big and strong, or be able to run fast, or something. No, if you manage to actually get a Tyrannosaurus Rex into your foe stone, instead, it only fits into a curse stone, or, universal stone. And anyone who dons this foe stone item undergoes a transmorgification, which their head becomes 4 sizes larger and their arms 4 sizes shorter. Just like a dumbass little T-Rex with little arms. I thought that was pretty funny, although as a lover of T-Rex, I was a little sad that they did my boy wrong. 89 is another funny curse with the Edin. You grow a second head that is under the control of the DM. That's obviously terrifying, but it's also pretty funny to say that, what did you think was going to happen with the Edin? Because that's the defining trait of that creature. Somebody was going to capture that essence. Yes, that's probably what's going to happen. For the giant ape, there's an obvious King Kong reference where, again, you think, okay, I'm going to gain the ability to get big and strong, or hurl, big rocks or something. But no, instead, it's only a summon stone. You summon a giant ape. The ape literally moves to grapple the nearest creature, or grapples a target of your choice, and then goes to the highest point it can with them, which is clearly a King Kong reference. And finally, the one that I definitely laughed at was one of the stones for the treant. If you turn your treant essence foe stone into an object stone, you get a baby treant that can dance, which distracts enemies, baby Groot style. That's fantastic. I understood that reference. So because there's just so many options here, there are, I already went over the really cool ones. There's also some really silly ones, but I really like the variety. I think there's a really solid variety of objects to choose from, and I think it's such a well thought out ability, and it's so open and moddable that I could definitely see myself using this system in my games, which is one of the if you'll excuse the indulgence, one of the highest praises I feel like I can give a supplement, because it's so well executed and there's just so many options to choose from, and the fact that it's very DM focused in that it gives me I feel like I've got all the tools to be able to, okay, here's how I would run it. I would have the player have to You know, I wouldn't use the types at all, but Foestones would be very rare. You could capture the essence, but I would use the level, so that maybe it's tied to like the level of the player. So if the players are level 7, you can only capture up to level 7 creature. It maybe takes a reaction to be able to do that capturing, and maybe there's a skill check involved. I could see that happening, because I like to, you know, implement the fact that when you throw a Pokeball, it's not just an instant thing. So I appreciate that as well. And maybe there's even a chance to capture them when they're low on health and not necessarily reduced to health. So, you know, these are all different additions and things that I would think of to do it. And I appreciate that it's so easy to, you know, make those choices and make all those rulings as a DM. All right, let's go over my pros and cons for the Foestone Compendium. Pros: rules light approach grants full access to DMs on how to implement Foestones. Pretty much I've been praising this the entire time, but I love that it is very DM focused with how moddable those rules are. Pro: over 666 to be exact. Foestone options from nearly 300 monsters from the official 5e monster manual. Holy crap, there's a lot of content here, nearly 200 pages worth. And pro: Foestones include a nice variety of passive buffs, active abilities, summonable creatures, and nasty curses. Yes, there are some copy-paste jobs, mainly in regards to dragons, but for the most part, I think the designer does a wonderful job distilling all of the different aspects of different creatures. Some of them are very tongue-in-cheek, but a lot of them are legitimately cool abilities, and the fact that we've got all of that in one compendium really makes me want to use this. Final verdict. And by the way, cons, none. Honestly, I have no complaints about this. The closest thing I would have had to a complaint, I think, would have been the actual presentation of this compendium, which, as I mentioned, I think is fine. Like, stock art is there for a reason. I think I would have liked if the art wasn't so focused on the monsters themselves, but also included art on the actual items and gear that we would be using. That's what this compendium actually is the gear itself and not the monsters, although obviously they're all inspired by the monsters. But the whole, everything's just columns and there's no real, it's just one big 160 page list of items, but the subheadings of all the different stones, the little colors they use to differentiate, like that actually saved the entire presentation for me, which is kind of weird because it's such a small thing when I'm sure when the designer was doing it, but to me that's a big deal. Like, it really makes everything pop, it draws the eye, it really helps to separate all these different items out. So I think from a presentation standpoint, that actually looks really, really well done. Final verdict: with refreshingly accessible, easy to implement rules and a ridiculously comprehensive list of options and gear, the Foestone Compendium succeeds at transforming captured monsters into magical gear and treasures. Thank you to everyone for watching this video review. You can see my written review at roguewatson.com. You can watch more reviews and follow our own D&D adventures here on my YouTube channel, and you can support my work at patreon.com/roguewatson. Thank you.